Truckers of Reddit, have you ever gotten spooked or creeped out while parking overnight somewhere? If so, what happened? Story 1, not a trucker, but I drive a lot of miles in a company truck for my oil field company. I am on call 24/7, so I'm out at all hours. One night, after a long day on a location in the Oklahoma Panhandle, which is rather remote and sparsely populated, I was driving back to the town where my shop is located. I got too sleepy to drive and decided to pull over and nap until the sun came up, so I pulled off of the 2-lane highway down a county road and parked on the side of that road. It's safer than pulling off on the shoulder of the highway, and no headlights to bother you. This was as common practice for me. I left my pickup running and turned the headlights off and leaned my seat back and fell asleep pretty quick with the AC on low and the radio turned off. I slept pretty good for maybe an hour, and then I guess I was having strange dreams, so I woke up but just kept laying there because I was groggy. The wind was picking up and sort of shaking the truck with random strong gusts. Lots of wind in Oklahoma. Eventually, I started to imagine I was hearing whispering or murmurs, but I attributed it to the wind and my sleepy state, or maybe the radio being still on, but low volume. I kept hearing it, so I sat up and turned the headlights back on to look around. The lights illuminated the dirt road to my side, and in front of me, about 50 feet in front of my truck, and extending down the road into the dark where my headlights faded out, were maybe 20 coyotes all milling around and sniffling around in the gravel of the road, their eyes reflecting in the lights. Coyotes usually run from light and avoid humans and their noise at all costs. There was no fear in these coyotes, and I was sort of struck by how many there were all standing in the road. They all eventually moved off into the dark as a group. I wasn't really afraid as I was inside my truck, but my feeling was an uneasy one, so I got back on the highway and went home. Story 2, I used to haul salt water off of well sites in Oklahoma on the night shift. I was standing at the rear of my trailer as I was loading out in BFE somewhere when I heard gravel crunching like someone was walking towards me. Got that feeling where you feel you're being watched. Stepped around the trailer towards the sound and shined my flashlight at a cow licking the side of my trailer. Story 3, back when my dad was a truck driver, he stopped to sleep in a lot one night. The guy he leased his truck from happened to see him parked there, and in the morning when my dad went to the restroom, this guy used a spare key and hid in the sleeper. Once my dad was on starting to leave, the guy reached out and grabbed him. My dad said he freaked out, so he just bailed out of the truck. It was moving around 5 miles per hour. Story 4, pulled over for a break on the way to Melbourne from Sydney at a truck stop. No street lights or anything, pitch black, no other trucks or cars at the stop. I turn off my lights, I switch the truck off, do the curtains, lock the truck for both sides, jump into bed, set my alarm, and set my phone above me in the compartment. I was rolling over from side to side for around 5 to 10 minutes. I couldn't get to sleep due to it being prime summer temperatures reaching around 30 degrees at night. I'm looking up at the ceiling, mentally planning out the day ahead. Suddenly the passenger side door opens up slightly. Cabin light turns on. What the? Now, the truck is fairly a late model and in pristine condition, so there's no question about door being faulty or anything. I just sat there for what felt like eternity, expecting someone to come up and see me sitting there with the solid rod in my hand that we use for tightening belts. No one came up, nor was there any noise at all. Just quiet, eerie silence. I grabbed my torch and jumped down, walked around the truck. No other trucks were around, nor were there any cars. It was just me and my fully loaded B-double. After around 5 to 10 minutes of getting around with, I locked up and went to bed again. Woke up next morning, yawned, fixed myself up along with the bed, opened the curtains, and FML, there's a cemetery next to the stop where I parked. Hunger and laziness all escaped upon realization. Grabbed keys, putting shoes on, putting pants on, switched truck on, and then just got the out of there ASAP. Story 5, wow. I actually have a relevant story. I'm not a trucker, but I was headed from Salt Lake City, Utah to Albuquerque, New Mexico late on a Friday evening. When I got to southern Utah and near the Arizona border, I had gotten tired enough to need to pull over and sleep. I took a county road off with some highway exit and was driving down it to pull off so that I could sleep without heat flights interrupting me or getting woken up by a state trooper and being asked to move along. That could be pretty annoying. And as a person who sleeps in his car a fair amount on road trips to get a few hours before pushing on again, it's just uncomfortable to be woken up. Anyway, the following happened as I'm driving along this county road a few miles away from the highway at about 3 in the morning, and suddenly lights come on right behind me with a vehicle that is very close on my. It's a large Dodge truck with a light bar and 4 or 5 halo lights that are shining into my rear view, blinding me. I try to pull over so that they can get around, heart beating and very scared. They pull over behind me, so I take off and try to lose them, but I am in a shiny older Saturn sedan, and they're in a pickup truck with 4-wheel drive on a road they are familiar with. It becomes clear that I'm not going to be able to lose them. They're swerving behind me. They're trying to pull up beside me, and they're flicking their lights. This was a very scary experience. I thought it through and had no idea what road I pulled off of. So calling 911 wouldn't have helped me since I couldn't tell them where to show up to help me. Regardless, this emergency was happening now, and I needed to deal with it. It was a fight or flight situation, and my flight was not working, so I decided to fight. I always travel with a small weapon of some kind, and what I had between my driver's side door and my seat was a very large hunting knife. So I pulled my e-brake suddenly and slammed to a stop. As soon as my car stopped moving, I got out and started running to the truck, terrified but yelling like I was just insane and ready for battle. They were sliding to a stop behind me and actually almost hit my Saturn by the time that I was almost at their truck. They had thrown it in reverse and were backing up. I could see inside of their truck, and it looked like some teenagers on the bench seat. The look of fright on their faces made me more emboldened, and I roared and yelled and cussed as they spun around and took off. It occurred to me after that, while calming down from a really terrifying experience, that they were just kids out having some fun on a weekend night in a rural area. But to me, it really felt like I was being attacked, and maybe they were going to try to kill me. I still think back on it with a lot of fear because it was just a helpless situation, and my only reaction that seemed appropriate was to try to at least hurt them before they killed me. So somewhere out there now, 10 years later, are a group of young adults in their mid-20s to late 20s who have a crazy story about some redneck who turned the tables on them and charged them with a knife while they were just having a little fun. Story 6, my boyfriend is a truck driver who routinely does midnight runs. Oddly enough, I asked him this question myself a few days ago. He told me that one night he getting ready to park in a lot next to a truck stop. He said it looked like there was no lights, no cars, no sign of anyone. But he said screw it, he was tired. He woke up the next morning parked on the side of the road with 3 highway patrol vehicles behind him. He was about 15 miles away from the truck stop he parked at. Thing is, he was sleeping in his camper the whole night. He has no idea how he got on the side of the road. And logic says someone tried stealing the truck and succeeded. And the police convinced him of this happening as they saw a man in a black jumpsuit running away from his truck into a nearby field. Even then, he still feels uneasy about the whole situation. Apparently, the doors were still locked from the inside, and there was no real sign of anyone trying to break in. Added just a few extra details I thought I should add. The police did breathalyze for alcohol, and it came up clear. Even more unsettling is that he puts his keys in the same place every night, which is next to his handgun in one of those metal boxes which remained untouched. Also, the police officers could not locate where the man in the jumpsuit was, or could have gone. It was an open field with no building in sight, and they didn't actually stop the truck or see it moving. The only reason they decided to check on the truck was because of a call they received from a worried woman. Everyone was weirded out, couldn't really issue any real fines, so they let my boyfriend leave. Story 7 have a trucker story from the extended family. An uncle used to drive a lot, and he always came back with the most weirdest stories ever. While every family member knew his stories, there was one story he told and warned about, even to me when I was 6 or so. Moral of the story is to never stay during night in the desert alone. It seems once he drove to Chile, he had a contract, and the weather was okay. I made the travel myself later in life. It's beautiful. Whenever he was done, he usually spent a few bucks on booze, but this time, due to a family gathering, he wanted to come back as soon as possible. So instead of drinking in some bar, he decided to sleep a bit at the Atacama Desert. Well, it's a desert, and he had parked way outside the road and a few miles before the next village. He sleeps and wakes up on someone singing. He is confused and thinks it's the radio, but the radio is not on. Then the singing stops, and it sounds more like a scream of help. That's when he wants to get out and help, but still he is confused. He said he started the motor and the lights to see where and who was there. He also did open the window a bit and yelled, asking what happened. It was nothing, and right then when he decides to get out anyway, he catches a movement in the corner where the lights end. It looked like a woman, but the face was pitch dark. He freaks out and drives away, nonstop until he reached home. Whatever he saw or thought he saw, every time he told the story his face went pale. Even my grandmother commented how he was usually a very jolly guy, but whatever happened in the Atacama Desert freaked him totally out. Story 8, I was driving overnight in a very low-populated area. Due to circumstances, I was seriously sleep-deprived. Driving in a poorly lit stretch of woods, my headlights started to cast shadows through the rails on the side of the road and started playing on the trees on either side. It looked and felt like I was driving across an ocean. And then the hallucinations started. When you're seriously sleep-deprived, you'll start to see shadows flicking across the edges of your field of vision. Shadowy figures started appearing in the water next to the road, swimming alongside me. They looked like monstrous mermaids, jumping in and out of the water. The Dutch roads are notorious for having very few truck stops that actually have space for a real truck. So I drove for another hour taunted by these figures. First truck stop, I pull into and ready myself for a nap. I wake up a couple of hours later, and one of the figures was in the cab with me. Looking at me, I freeze, terrified for my life. I couldn't move until I calmed down enough to start noticing that while it seems to be moving and breathing, it doesn't seem to move that much. And then I realized it was my coat, slung across the seat. Panic subsided, and I used the adrenaline rush to drive the 2 more hours I had to go. Other time, less spooky but creepy enough, a truck stop I was parked that was infested with lot lizards. I'd already seen some of the less lizardy types get into trucks. I was reading a book when suddenly I hear my handle of the passenger door being pulled. It was locked, luckily, but that didn't stop the unseen puller to try to open it. It stops for a second, and I suddenly feel the cab swinging a bit like someone was on a ladder. Up comes this horrible visage of rotting, missing teeth with a balding head and so much eyeliner could be called face liner. She mom's giving me a, but I refuse. She jumps off and I see her storming off, furious about something. Most of the other truckers were laughing at me. She was well known amongst the local truckers for her wiles. Story 9, NSFW. Not a trucker, but worked with lots worse. Story I heard was a guy who parked up in a lobby for a few hours sleep. Was awoken by banging on the cab, so came up front and opened the curtains to see a guy stood in front. As soon as the guy saw him, he got his out and started wanking in front of the cab. He didn't stop until the driver got out of the cab and literally chased him off. Thinking he might come back, the driver moved his truck a few miles down the road and went back to sleep, only to be woken up by the same guy doing the same thing a few hours later. Phoned the police the second time, and the guy got in a car and drove off. Story 10, 2 stories. Maybe not winners, but creepy overnight parking for sure. I was really new to the business and had parked a stop in Texas en route from one place to another. It was August. There was nothing unusual about this situation. I was in the middle of a parking lot with 70-odd other trucks. I woke up with a start 6 hours later to the truck shaking and rolling, hellacious noise all around, and a psychedelic light show blasting me from every direction. It was a severe thunderstorm that ID had no idea was coming. Wind, pounding rain, thunder, and lightning to beat. Being in a truck during a storm is closer to being in a tent than a house. ID never experienced it before, and even though I grew up with this kind of severe weather, I lay there in this tossing, heaving sensory party going. I don't even know where ID go right now to get safe if I had to. I don't even know how to find out if this is severe or regular or a tornado. I was really tired the next morning. 2, I parked for the night somewhere in southwest Michigan, on the way to Grand Rapids. Again, a truck stop full of trucks, shut down, and went to bed. I woke up looking at one of the cabin lights, which was on. I think, fell asleep with the lights on again, genius. Then freeze. The light I'm looking at only comes on if you deliberately turn it on, which I never did, or if the door is open. Just then I felt the slight roll of the cab that's telltale whenever someone's climbing up. I wish I had some heroic Rambo. I could claim I did, but I can't. I yelled. Now, I can make myself heard in very loud environments pretty easily, and this was the dead of a quiet night, and I yelled, "Get out," loud enough to send Legion into the Gerasene pigs. There was a frenzied scrambling, and the truck rocked some more. Then I hear a very small woman's voice. "I'm sorry, I got the wrong truck." Nothing from me for a second. Then, "Are you okay? Yeah, just get the out of here." Moral of that story, lock your doors. She was either a driver or a prostitute. And it doesn't matter, because either way, she got the wrong truck. Also not a trucker, but have a spooky story. About 3 to 4 years ago, my dad and I took a 25-hour journey from Southern California to McAllen, Texas Mexes, as some call it. This was late November. Around 5 to 6 p.m., still plenty light outside. This white car that appeared to be fresh off the lot, no numbers on the plate. Just the dealership plate starts pulling in front of us repeatedly and cutting us off amidst the freeway traffic. The windows were heavily tinted, so you couldn't see who was inside. It was pretty irritating, and they continued to do this, so we sped up and eventually lost them. It began growing dark outside. I was tired, and I fell asleep as my dad continued driving. At this point, the freeway was empty. We had passed the major cities in Texas. There was nobody else on the road. I woke up at about 1:30 a.m. because I could feel our car alternately speeding and slowing down. I sat up and rubbed eyes and noticed we were alone on the freeway. Wait, holy, was that the same white car behind us? I look at my dad, who didn't say a word, but continued driving very seriously. My dad, the very confident driver, macho man type guy. We were going up to 110 miles per hour. This white car would match our speed, then quickly switch lanes and pull right in front of us. Over and over again. When we'd slow down, they'd slow down. When we sped up, so did they. This is some pretty scary when you're in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. Obviously, I'm panicking. I was 19. Like, what's happening? Are we going to be okay? I don't know what they're trying to do. It's like a game of cat and mouse. My dad says, I guess this has been going on for at least 30 minutes. So my dad decides to end this once and for all. He starts gunning it way fast, close to 117 to 120 miles per hour until they're out of sight, which works. He takes the closest exit, pulls off the road. We went under an underpass. He switches off the lights, kills the engine, takes a gun out of his center console, gets out of his car, and just stands there. My dad is a very calm, stoic man, ex-cop who never shows emotion. I was convinced we were both going to die, or I was going to be brutally kidnapped by the cartel, or something. About 2 minutes later, slowly, I hear gravel beneath wheels, my heart freezes, and I see the white car, eerily slow, exit the freeway and turn the corner in the road. Towards us, the lights shine directly on us under the overpass, illuminating my dad, firmly positioned, both hands on his gun, pointed directly at them. They just passed us, continued their slow drive down the road, toward the gas station. We immediately turned the car around, went back to the freeway, booked the out of the gas pedal, and never saw them again. This is actually one I can answer due to my father having been a truck driver for over 30 years. He is currently in the hospital due to back problems. There might be a connection. Mind you, this story might have happened 5, maybe 20 years ago, and it's a retelling of a retelling. I might even go back and edit certain parts if I recall something different, but I'll do my best to summarize. One night, as my father was trying to catch a few hours of sleep in the bed of his truck before having to kind of illegally drive a few more hours than he was supposed to, due to time constraints and bad traffic all day, he heard little bumps from the outside, like a raccoon trying to get into a metal shed. So his first thought was simply it probably was a raccoon. But then things turned a bit creepy. He started hearing more noises and finally some mumbling from outside. Clearly no raccoon, but a couple of guys, maybe 2 to 3, fully convinced this wasn't just an animal. My father tried to get up, but simply couldn't. It was like he was mentally all there, but his muscles weren't responding. It wasn't anything like sleep paralysis, though. Turns out, those guys put a little rubber tube through the truck's little skylight, which was tilted open slightly, for some fresh air while sleeping, and poured some kind of knockout gas, or something like that, into the truck's cabin. Barely conscious, he could just lay there and watch as 2 men entered the cabin. After fiddling around with the lock for a few more minutes, they took all they could find, both company and private phone, his wallet, and even his shoes, something that I personally find most terrifying. One of the thieves was searching everything very thoroughly. He gave my dad a complete pat-down, pockets of pants and shirt, under his pillow, basically anywhere someone might hide something valuable. Personally, that would have freaked me out the most, and the most interesting part about this story is that he told me about it, as if it were just a thing you got to go through when being a trucker. And this story in particular isn't too rare out there. He said he also told me a ton of horror stories from other drivers, but I wanted to keep in the family for this one. Maybe another day. Later it turns out, after one Google search, those kinds of robberies are actually really common for all kinds of drivers and tourists. Scary thought. Even later edit turns out that after several comments and following fruitless Google searches, the gas robbery thing might just be an over-exaggerated myth. This story might be completely false memory on my dad's end, or not, or mine. Would never know. Story 11. My father-in-law is a trucker in Australia. He told me a story of one night in the middle of Outback. Not a soul in sight, and hundreds of kms between towns. Australia is huge, especially on the west coast where we are. Pitch black night. A tire blows out. He pulls to the shoulder and starts the task of changing. Feeling uneasy, he keeps looking over his shoulders. Something isn't right. Working fast, telling himself to stop being a scared cat. Then, all of a sudden, a hand lands on his shoulder. Hey there, mate, you have a spare smoke? An Aboriginal man has wandered up to him like it was a normal thing, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. He says, "No, mate, I don't smoke." So the man just walks away into the darkness. He reckons he aged about 20 years that night. Story 12. Not a trucker, but was making the drive to my new university from halfway across the country. It's dark, and I'm driving through pitch-black forested rural areas, but my destination is only another 2 hours away. So I'm going for it. I'm tired but determined, maybe a little too weary to still be on the road when it's so dark. Then, as I'm making my way up the slow curve of a hill, I see 4 bright blue lights glaring in the distance through the trees, hovering maybe 5 feet off the ground, but it's too dark to tell how far they are away from me. I'm freaking out. I don't know if I should slow down or speed the up, but either way I'm getting closer and closer. It only takes about 30 seconds for me to round the curve in the road, but it felt like forever. My blood has run cold and my mind is racing because I watch way too many stupid UFO conspiracy documentaries. Finally, I can tell where the lights are in relation to me. We'll be directly passing them soon, and I swear I'd never been so on edge before. If my hand weren't so tightly gripped around the wheel, they'd be shaking. Christmas lights. They were 4 plastic stars with blue lights in the center, having been hung up on a few trees. As I was breathing a sigh of relief and regaining my composure, I passed a farmhouse they most likely belonged to. That one of my trucker friends has a story about spending the night alone in a rural stop in the middle of a Maine winter. She had a bit of an uneasy feeling about the place, but couldn't put her finger on anything and needed badly to rest. So she stayed. Perfect Stephen King setup, right? She's usually a very solid sleeper, but wakes up around 3 a.m. that night. She's not quite sure what woke her up, until she notices that the cab is very slowly and gently rocking side to side. She can also hear an intermittent, soft sort of rubbing sound that corresponds with the rocking. She was a seasoned trucker already at this point, but really wasn't sure what this was, and all the ideas that came to mind ranged from the mundane but alarmingly unsavory to the outright paranormal. Terrified, she creeps up to look in the side view mirror to see what's out there. Turns out some moose like to lick the road salt off of semi-trucks. Story 13, like most people here, this didn't happen to me. One of my good friends from middle school had a stepfather who was a truck driver for a good amount of time. He was a tough son of. I never saw him not look like he could kill someone except one time, when he told us why he stopped driving trucks. He was on a long trip from somewhere down in Texas to Boise, Idaho. By the time he hit the freeway close to Boise, he had already been up for 24 hours. Either way, I don't believe he could have seen this coming. Outside of Boise, he was driving late at night at the fastest legal speed when out of nowhere he sees someone sit straight up in the middle of the road. He didn't have enough time to even hit the brakes. Not that it would have helped. She was decapitated on the spot. He later found out she was tweaked out. I don't think even if he wasn't sleep-deprived, he would have seen her lie in the road. From what the police could gather, she walked out there, sat down, and eventually fell asleep in the road. No one knows who she was or how she got that far out. Story 14, one time, in the middle of the workday, I got this ungodly, painful migraine. So I pull off at a truck stop with my load, shut my curtains, and take a nap. I was asleep for maybe an hour and a half, but I woke up because I had the most vivid dream of me waking up in my sleeper and continuing my day. In my dream, I remember I was still loaded and coming down a hill when a four-wheeler slammed on their brakes. I locked mine up and swerved left, which you should never do. I went into the bar ditch and rolled my rig. About that point in my dream, I woke up drenched in sweat and was completely mined. I was really hesitant to get back in the driver's seat and finish my day. Story 15, I'm a female, so I get creeped out a ton. I drive at night because I think it's more peaceful and my husband drives during the day. I avoid rest stops like the plague because they always seem the creepiest. I also listen to forensic files on the radio while driving, and it fuels my paranoia. One night when I had first started driving, I stopped at a rest stop instead of a well-lit truck stop just to use the bathroom and stretch my legs. I heard on the news a week later that a middle-aged woman had been kidnapped from a rest stop in Arizona, and they hadn't found her yet. I had just been in Arizona a few days prior. I may not have been at the same one, but it still makes me feel vulnerable. I carry mace everywhere I go now. Story 16, nothing huge, but I once was stopped by a train in Calumet City, Illinois, probably 2 or 3 a.m., and it's a kind of the ghetto area. So I was a little uneasy being there at that time. The company I was delivering to was at a dead end just after the tracks. Of course, there wasn't anyone around, just me. I sat parked for like 5 minutes waiting on the train, and all of a sudden, I heard loud knocking on my door, like rapidly get my attention. I have a day cab, so I looked all around the truck through the windows and mirrors. Nobody. The road was wide enough that I would have totally seen someone run away after doing it. I'm sure it was something not on this plane, and I accept that. I'm sure people have been killed in that area at some point in the past. Story 17, I used to drive truck in northern Manitoba. There's a road in the northeast you can drive for several hours and see very few vehicles. This road is quite flat and straight in stretches, of course. This is deep in the bush. One day, I saw something cross the road in the distance, very large, easily past the hood on my truck. But not long, like a moose or elk, just tall, it disappeared into the bush, and as I drove by the spot the hair on the back of my neck stood up, I heard days later a tow truck driver describing on the radio his encounter with a similar creature. Only he was much more clear he had spotted Bigfoot. This guy went to some length to explain he didn't want people thinking he was crazy, but he was sure what he saw. I asked an Aboriginal client of mine in a nearby community, and he said the elders spoke of them as commonly the same way they spoke of the other animals. I don't know what I saw that day, but I'm certain it wasn't a bear, moose, deer, or elk. I just don't know what it was. Story 18, not a trucker, but road trip story. Here, I went deep south, South Carolina to visit my cousins a few years back. After 6 hours on Bora 95, we decided to go to a bar which they all call the Swamp Joint. It is at this point just an old shed with beer allegedly owned by a black magic prone Native American. He is also supposed to be 120 years old, but that's another story. Anywho, we go get blasted. I gather my 9 cousins to leave. When we get outside of this shed on the riverbank, none of our 4 cars will start. Okay, maybe we all left our lights on. We were deep woods and all had our highs on. We asked for a jump a few times. Everyone says no, very apologetically. They advise asking Wise Jonna, the magic Cherokee, owner of said bar. We keep trying. Finally ask him. He says hell help, but doesn't leave his little room in the bar shed thing. After sitting and waiting, the ground vibrates and we see a glow on the overgrown grass. Wild dogs show up and surround us. We are all silently freaking out, but frozen with fear. After about 15 minutes, Jonna emerges and says, "Try your wheels now." All cars start. We haul to south of the border. My cousin refuses to tell me where we were. Take me back. Acknowledge anything strange occurred or that night. I have so many questions. Story 19. A couple years ago, I was sleeping in my van in North Hollywood after getting off of work. I had the seats folded down and a long plywood plank with a mattress on top of them. So I was elevated at windows level, but they were tinted. Woke up late one night and was startled by a guy standing outside staring into the van and talking to himself. I realized he wasn't trying to look in, but was looking at his reflection. I don't know how long he'd been there, but he was there for another 15 minutes until he staggered off. Story 20. Obligatory. Not a trucker, but fits with the rest of the question. About 14 to 15 years ago, two of my buddies had a conference out of state to attend. They decided to take the entire week off, drive there, and do a road trip basically. Arrive there fine. Conference is over, blah, blah, and now they're heading back home. First night coming back, they grab a hotel to stay at. Second day, they decide to just stay up and power their way home. As night comes and gets late, the passenger starts dozing off. They decide it's safer to stop at the next rest area and crash. As they arrive, for the most part, the lot is pretty empty. A few trucks and some smaller cars sprinkled around. Passenger falls asleep, but the driver can't. He closes his eyes, but just can't doze off. There's a small light just where the bathrooms are at. And for some reason, he's feeling paranoid. He'll close his eyes and then open them just to check that spot over and over. Finally, he dozes off a bit. He wakes up in a panic, still paranoid, and he checks the spot again. Just at the last moment, he claims he sees what looks like somebody going behind the building. He tries to calm himself. After laying back down for a bit, he sneaks back up, and he claims he sees what looks like a woman with frizzled hair and very worn, tattered clothes just walk and disappear into the bushes in the distance where the bathrooms are. He panics and wakes up passenger. After explaining the situation, they stay up to see if anything else happens. Nothing else happened. That morning, they quickly scout the spot. Behind the bushes where he claimed to see her was a long brick wall. So obviously you can't just walk through it. Most likely could have been a homeless lady, but they were at a rest area next to nothing but highway. Story 21. Not me, but my dad saw a fuel plant explosion while driving his truck late in the night, early morning. He said you could feel the heat from the explosion pass through the cab as it happened. The explosion also caused the cab to shake. He was half asleep while driving, so I'm sure that woke him up. I believe this was the plant that exploded. Story 22. Only once. In a truck stop in LA, I looped one of my 4 wide ratchet straps through the door handles on my truck and snugged it up so nobody could get in even if they broke the windows. Once the sun was up the next morning, it was all good, and I went on my way. Story 23. After reading through a majority of the comments on this thread, my curiosity was piqued, and I called my mom up to ask her if my great-grandfather, a trucker during the 60s, had ever told her a creepy story of being on the road. To my surprise, she said there was one story he told her as a cautionary tale. It's not about parking overnight somewhere, but I thought it might fit in here just the same. He said he was driving through somewhere pretty rural, a small town with a few houses here and there. As he was making his way down the road, he saw a large cardboard box tumble down a hill and come to a stop pretty much directly in his path on the road. It was too late for him to brake, but why would he? It's just a cardboard box. It's not like it would hurt his truck if he ran over it. So he kept chugging forward, and nearly the last second, he said something came over him, and he immediately swerved to the right to avoid hitting the box. When he looked in his rearview mirror, he saw 2 little kids scramble out of the box and back up the hill. It's amazing what little kids in a small town will do for fun. I still feel sick to my stomach after hearing my mom tell that story.